So yep, we are good to go. I see everybody. I see the live is up. And so once again, thank you everyone for joining us again. We have another great speaker for you. For the last couple of days or so, we've had a number of topics, definitely a number of topics where we talk through and chat a little bit more in terms of if you have a business, are you looking to start a business? Are you trying to grow your business? What are you trying to do? And where are you trying to go? And I think oftentimes it's easier to get started and maybe you're started, but it's not a legitimized business. And we talked about that a little bit. So maybe you have a hobby and that hobby makes you money on the side, but it's not in a place where you can go get a bank loan, or it's not at a point where maybe you could hire employees, or maybe you could add employee benefits and so forth. So really it's important for us to talk about how to get legit and grow. And so we were having a number of conversations probably within the hour just about kind of what do you need and what are the next steps. And sometimes it's a lot easier to kind of get started with a passion opposed to getting it to that next step. And so that's why we have Bernadette Harris with us today. She's going to talk about a lot of great tips, and especially with her longevity for her own business, she's going to have a lot of practical tips with us as well. I did drop some information a little bit earlier today, just talking about some of the additional resources, and that's really what we're here for, to really make sure that you have all of the resources within reach to make great decisions for whatever path that you choose to take. Not everybody's necessarily going to be a business owner, but if you are, we want to make sure that you have those tips as well. And so with our partnership with Eureka, and we'll drop the link in there as well, you will have the opportunity to join a business community where you can actually have hands-on communication, whether that be with attorneys, with CPAs, with professionals, other business owners, really to strengthen your network and get you to the next point. And so I'll tell you a little bit about our fabulous speaker on today, Miss Bernadette Harris, an award-winning tax and forensic accountant, best-selling author, adjunct instructor, and highly sought-after keynote speaker, committed to keeping small businesses in business. As a president of the By the Book Accounting, she has helped thousands of entrepreneurs across the country start, operate, and grow their thriving ventures, which is huge. Sometimes it's easier to start, but not necessarily grow. Bernadette is a certified fraud examiner, has a BS in accounting, an MBA, and an MS in fraud and forensics. She's an expert at taking complex subjects like taxes and accounting and making them easy to understand and fun. She has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and other nationally known media outlets, speaking on entrepreneurship and fraud prevention. She'll give her first TEDx talk on September 19th of 2020. And also, she just launched her podcast. So hopefully she'll drop that link as well so we can be sure to follow along and get some good tidbits from there as well. So, Bernadette, I'll let you open up.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here. Always a pleasure to share with other entrepreneurs and just tips and things that's going to help businesses stay in business. That's my mission, is to keep small business in business. I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, and one of the things that I know for sure is that businesses don't go out of business because they don't know how to do what they do. They go out of business because they don't know how to run a business. And I say it all the time that there is a very distinct difference between baking a really bad pound cake and running a bakery. And so one of the things that I do is teach people how to run the bakery. Because we may have the good recipe, but running a bakery is something completely different. So really, really excited to be here. So I know that we're on Zoom and I can't see comments or whatever, but I really do want this to be interactive because I don't know what you don't know. So I'll share some information, but I really want to spend a lot of time answering your questions and making sure that you leave here better than you came. So appreciating this time that you have. So when I was asked to speak to the group, one of the topics that came to mind was directly related when I think about COVID. COVID has had an impact, we can say positive or negative, on businesses across the country. Some businesses have been impacted positively because their business has increased. And then there are other businesses who have been affected negatively because maybe they're still closed, or they may not be back into full capacity. One of the things that I recognize as an accountant working with small business owners, and maybe even some people who thought that they didn't need me or couldn't afford me, is that a lot of small business owners were left out when it came to being funded with what we call the stimulus money or the COVID cash, whatever you want to call it. There were lots of business owners that were left out. And they were left out because they weren't legit. And so that's just the real deal. It's just they weren't legit. They didn't have the documentation that they needed to be able to apply for and be approved for these loans. And so while I hope and pray that nothing like COVID ever happens again, I would love for us all to learn from this situation so that we are in a better position. Let's not say the next time, but we're just in a better position. How about that? We'll just say that we're in a better position, because here's the thing. If you are truly in business to be in business, you have to operate on a different level. And so tonight I hope that if I mention any of your bad habits, you don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to say amen. You don't have to agree with me. But I hope that after tonight, if I do mention any of your bad habits, that you'll do whatever it is that you need to do to kind of rectify that. So again, I don't want to lecture for a long time. So will you, Rosalyn, will you let me know if you have
questions. Yep.
questions or anything while we're talking? Please interrupt me, because I probably will need water. so, uh, so one of the things, the first thing that I wanted to share is that as business owners, when you're starting a business, whether it's a side gig or it's a full-time business, you have to prioritize having a relationship with an accountant. A lot of people don't think that's important. They want to spend time on getting their social media handles and getting their logos, making sure that they have all their branding in place, and they don't prioritize having an accountant and making sure that those things are in place. And I can't say to you enough, a lot of the businesses that were left out in this funding round were the ones that didn't prioritize having an accountant. And so let me just explain what that means, because a lot of people think that they can't afford to have an accountant. And I just want to challenge you to reframe that to say that you can't afford to not have an accountant. And having an accountant doesn't necessarily mean that you have a monthly bill that you have to pay. But I think that every time, any business, before you get started, you need to establish a relationship with somebody, whether it's me or someone else, that is going to help you to understand how to set up your accounting system. What are your tax consequences? Who's going to help you with strategic planning? All of these kinds of things. You need to have that kind of relationship. So that's the first thing I want to say, is that it's very important that you prioritize having an accountant. You may have heard people say that when you start a business, you want to make sure you have a good accountant and a good lawyer. And I cannot tell you how true that is. And I'm not saying it because I'm an accountant. I'm saying it because I've seen it to be true. Businesses that don't have that conversation with an accountant, or don't take the time to have a consultation with an accountant before they get started, they make mistakes, costly mistakes. It just costs more. So think about this. If you own a house and you have a little tiny pin crack in your ceiling, in the roof, if you get it fixed when it's that little tiny pin crack, it's a whole lot cheaper than if you wait until that joint is just leaking water all over the place. You know, it's like, and that's kind of how it is with an accountant. If you don't get one in the first place, that's how I feel. Like you could pay me either now or later. If you pay me now when you first get started, it's a lot less expensive than if you pay me later and I have to fix a mess that you made. And I say me, it doesn't have to be me. So really, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that you have that. And if you don't have that, you need to put that on your list of things that you are going to do so that you're better in 2020.
Now, Bernadette, when you're sitting down, you're getting started, you're trying to decide, okay, I need someone. How do I evaluate who is going to fit best for my business, my personality, my needs, maybe the size of my business, or even just the growth trajectory of where you're trying to go? So everyone's a startup at some point in time, but some people are going to go from a startup to $1 billion organization, and some people are going to go from a startup to $100,000 organization.
Right.
How do you evaluate who's the best fit for you to be a part of the team?
So I really believe in that good feeling. You know, like when you have a conversation, most accountants will allow you to do a consultation, initial consultation, so that you can see how they work, how they, you know, how they operate. It's really about, you know, maybe making a connection. Like when I hire people in my business for different services, I know when it's going to be a connection. Like if there's a connection, it's like, you know what? It was something about that person that I really like. But some of the things that you want to think about is you might want to ask them how long they've been in business. You might want to ask for referrals. I think referrals are the best way to find a new person. It just really is. And I have been very fortunate because 90% of my new clients have been because of referrals. So if you're in business and you are running in a circle of other business owners, ask them, who's your accountant? What do you like about them? What do you not like about them? You know, you ask those kind of questions to see if the things that your colleagues, your friends, your family members like about that person, if those are things that's going to be important to you, then you want to consider that. Then you also want to consider, like, my firm is virtual. And we were virtual before COVID. So our firm is virtual. Clients don't come into the office. Every client has like a secure portal. You send your information through the portal. We send it back to you through the portal. And so a person who wants to have a face-to-face with their accountant, or they want to touch and feel or be able to just pop up at their accountant's office, that person's not going to be a fit for me because my firm is virtual and we don't do that. So if that's something that's important to you, then you might want to find an accountant that is one that you can actually show up at there. Oh, you can't do it now, but soon and very soon. So you have to think about what are some of the things that's going to be important to you, and what are your work styles like? Like if you are really good about, like if you have strong computer skills, then working with a virtual accountant will work, because the last thing that you want is to have to physically mail something or drop something off. And there are other people who just love driving around town and don't mind dropping things off. And so it just really depends. Another thing that you want to think about is, how well do they explain stuff? Do they explain it in a way that it makes sense to you? And unfortunately, not all accountants are really good at explaining stuff in simple terms. So if after you have a conversation with them, do you feel like a plane just went over your head? Or do you feel like, you know what, I think I kind of understand. So it's not to say that you're going to feel like an accountant when you walk out of the meeting, but when you walk out of that meeting, do you feel like this person was able to explain it in a way that makes sense for you? Then you also may want to ask them, what other kind of clients do they have? Because to your point, if you have a business that's going to be $1 billion business, do they have any other $1 billion clients? Or will you be the only one? And if you are the only one, are you okay with that? Are you okay with being their first $1 billion client? Or do you want to work with somebody that's already familiar? So those are some of the things that you can ask for. Again, I can't stress how important referrals are, because just think about it. You know, when you want a good restaurant, you ask somebody like, you know what, I'm looking for a real good seafood restaurant. Have you been to one? And what do? We refer naturally, because that's just kind of the nature of what we do.
And then thinking about it for a number of businesses who are just getting started. So for the businesses that are in maybe hobby mode, and they're trying to go from, this is a hobby, I'm able to sell whatever it is that I sell, and that typically goes well. Maybe it's seasonal, and now I want to take it to something that I'm doing maybe full time, or go from just on the weekends. What are some of the kind of key mistakes that people traditionally make as they're just getting started? So they're going from, they're just, you know, their friends are cash apping them for the transaction.
Lord,
How are they
mercy,
moving
God.
from that to becoming something a little more legitimized? And then what are some of the problems or issues that you see that people often do in the very beginning, and then maybe they're contacting you later to come fix it?
Oh boy, you said you that was a lot. Okay, so I think the biggest mistake is, just because your business is a hobby or a side gig, it doesn't mean that you can't legitimize it. It doesn't mean that you can't put those things into place. And so here's, I have my QuickBooks file has every single transaction that I have ever conducted in 18 and a half years. I set up my accounting system on day one. My daughter and I were talking when we were doing some planning and stuff for my podcast, and she asked me who was my first client. And I was like, hold on, let me go look. And she's like, you have that? Of course I have it. It's in my QuickBooks file. I started my QuickBooks file on day one of my business. And so every transaction that I have ever done in my business, and my first year, so I'm just telling you guys, so I wasn't balling out. Like, I wasn't no overnight success. My first tax season, I did 20 tax returns. And let me tell you, I did 20 tax returns last week. So my first tax season, it was 20 tax returns, but I had that in, I had every single transaction in my QuickBooks file. So I think one of the things that business owners, the mistakes that they make is treating it like it's a hobby and not being serious about it. So one of my favorite analogies is, let's say you remarry, and the person that you remarry has kids and you have kids, and so now you have a blended family. Are you going to treat your kids different from you treat your husband's kids? No, they all your kids. You can't do that if that's what you, and that's what happens. Like, people who treat their little side businesses, part-time businesses, like they're not legitimate kids, they're your kids too. Treat them. So be legitimate from the start. Don't wait until, you're gonna wait until until you're making six figures to get your act together. Don't do it then, because one, you don't have the data. And so that's the other thing that I like about having transactions from day one. I can see, like, how much money did I make that first, or how much money I didn't make that first year, how much did I make the second year, and see the incremental progress, and see, where was my income coming from. And over the last 18 and a half years, there have been services that I've cut out because I thought they were profitable, but when I was actually looking at the numbers, it's like, girl, you ain't making no money doing that, and it's just taking up all your little time. And so being able to make those kind of decisions because you have an accounting system in place, that's something that's key, and that's not something that you have to wait to do when you are legit or full-time in business. I think it's a day one thing.
And you mentioned QuickBooks. What other resources? So as people are starting their business, they're getting things in place. There's often a significant amount of investment. So they're trying to figure out what should they do. And so a lot of times people, they'll go find somebody to build their website, somebody to create a logo. What type of investment should they be making? Should it be a QuickBook? Should it be another, maybe software? What other type of foundational investment should they be making? And I know it's hard as a business owner, especially a new business owner with finite resources, if you're paying for something that people don't see or feel.
Right.
But
Right.
what are some of those
So
investments that they
QuickBooks is my favorite. I use QuickBooks, have been for the duration of my business, but there are other accounting systems out there. There's a system, I think Wave, WAVE, is free. So Wave accounting is an option. Zero is another option. Is they trying to compete with QuickBooks. You know, they like running behind QuickBooks. So I think Zero is a little less expensive. FreshBooks. FreshBooks is also a system that's not as expensive. Um, and so my thing is, it's important to have a system, whatever that system is. God bless you. If it is an Excel spreadsheet, I cringe when but at least it's something. It's better than making up numbers or trying to figure it out. But QuickBooks, the least expensive version of QuickBooks is $25 a month.
And so thinking about, because I know last week we talked about some real estate investors and kind of how to get into, so if you're just a real estate investor, and I don't even want to say just a real estate investor, but if you're maybe more of a passive investor, so you have one or two rental properties, something of the sort, is that something where you should be using a QuickBooks, or should you, I mean, I know you cringed at the Excel, but could they get by on just an Excel document?
So here's my thing. Okay, so I'm a QuickBooks snob, right? I'm gonna admit that. But if you have Excel, if it's accurate, then that's fine. You know what I mean? So it's really about making sure you keep records. It's not so much about where you keep it. So yeah, if you have it in an Excel spreadsheet, just make sure your Excel spreadsheet has everything. What I found is that a lot of times when people don't use an accounting system like QuickBooks or Xero or FreshBooks, they forget stuff. And this happens very easily when you are doing the next thing that's on my list is commingling funds, right? And so when you are paying for stuff on your personal account, your credit card account, this and there, you got stuff all over the place. It's very easy to miss stuff when you have that. So Excel is not that bad. It's absolutely better than nothing. And it's definitely better than estimating and guessing, So just a hint for all of you who are listening, when you give your accountants your numbers and all of them end in zero, we know you're lying. Because there's absolutely no way that you spent $400 even on office supplies. Maybe $393, but not $4 even. Just saying.
Round up.
And see, round numbers is a red flag. So even for me, when I see it, I'm like, okay, they don't have an accounting system in place. And that's the same thing the IRS is thinking when they see your tax return too. So.
And so one of the things, and it might be a good piggyback off of what you said, is you're talking about commingling funds, not having records and so forth. So in the group, we talked a little bit in terms of kind of where you are in your business and wanting to go to the next step. And I was actually having a conversation a little bit earlier today. Someone talked about getting an SBA loan and not being qualified for an SBA loan because they didn't have projections and such. And I'm thinking, why would you not have projections? And he said, well, they wanted me to show that my business would be profitable. And I'm thinking, why would you be a business that's not profitable? But what are some of the issues or problems or reasons why people aren't getting to that next step? So someone has a viable business, maybe they've been in business for 3, 4, 5 years, and now they're wanting to maybe go to the bank and get a loan, maybe get some investors, get a second location, whatever that might be. What are some of the things that you are seeing that is hindering their ability to do that?
Because, yeah, it still goes back to the accounting system. So not having an accounting system and you don't know your numbers. You don't even know if you're in a position to be able to sustain a second location, because you might not know what that first location is bringing in. So knowing your numbers and having an accounting system to be able to account for those things, and just to see where your costs are, so you can see. I look at my numbers probably more than I need to, but I'm looking at my numbers all the time to see, and I compare this time to last time. The June of this year, I'm comparing that to June of last year, which is going to be a totally different story because COVID has just changed everything. But in normal circumstances, right? We're making comparisons, looking at it like, am I spending more money? Did I spend money on more money on XYZ? Did this yield something? And so I can see correlations in my numbers when I'm able to look at that. And a lot of times businesses aren't able to grow when you're not doing that, right? So you don't know. If you're not paying attention to your numbers, you log into your bank account in the morning and you see you have some money in there, and then you just transfer some money over to your personal account. You're not paying attention to what you need that money for. How much do you need to leave in the account for some upcoming expenses? You don't have an idea of any of
That makes sense.
that stuff. It's like I'm like, did she overhear a conversation that I had?
And that's because it's a really big deal. I think just legitimizing the business, making sure that you have the foundation, but also I often talk about kind of having that team, and you talked about the attorney and the CPA. What type of coordination should owners do to make sure that their team is all together? I say sometimes, especially most people, if you know me, my background is banking. And oftentimes what will happen is you'll have your accountant with one goal to reduce your tax liability. And your banker is like, but you told me that you wanted to grow your business. So your accountant is working to make sure your income is as low as possible. And your banker is saying, you don't have enough income.
Right.
And so that kind of coordination of the team, how do you make that happen? And then how often should they be facilitating this kind of coordinated effort to make sure that everyone's on that same long-term goal?
So that's where the strategic planning comes in, because every phase of your business or phase of your life requires something different. So like you said, if you're in the position where you are going to be looking to buy something, a property or a house or a car or something, and you need to be showing income, that's a conversation you need to have with your accountant to make sure that, not to say that you are preparing a fraudulent return, but you're planning in that situation. So I'll share my own personal story. My daughter, which she's grown now, but when she was getting ready to go to college, the year before she went to college, I did a major downsize my whole life, right? And I even downsized my business for a period of time because we were trying to get financial aid for her for school. So my car was paid off. I just downsized a whole lot of stuff, but that was always a part of the plan. Like, we knew that she was going to college, and my thing was, if I can qualify for some of this need-based money, then that's what I'm gonna do. And so for 4 years, and I tell my daughter now, like, I was poor for you for 4 years. But for 4 years, that was a part of the plan. Like, it was really scaled back, bare bones, to make sure that she was able to get the funding that she because a lot of her scholarships, even though they weren't like Pell Grant or anything like that, they were Pell Grant. They required, you had to be Pell Grant eligible. So as long as I was Pell Grant eligible, like, one of her scholarships was from Magic Johnson, and I just had to be Pell Grant eligible, and it was huge. That was a huge scholarship. And so that was a part of our plan. Like, this is for these 4 years, I need to make sure that my income is below a certain amount so that she can continue to get her financial aid. And when that last year, thank God, then I was able to kind of take it up and then go and then I had to ramp it up, like, okay, in 2 years, I want to be able to buy a house. So now I got to ramp it up to be able to make enough money so that I can qualify for a house. So you have to have those conversations. Your accountant does not read minds. They don't know when you send your documents that you're trying to buy a house in 2 years or you sending little Johnny to college in 4. You have to have those kind of conversations to let them know these are some of the things that I want to do. What, based on my goals, what do I need to be doing to be able to reach those goals?
Now, I know oftentimes kind of the extent of our accountant relationships is probably, this is the person that does my taxes. And after April 15th, please go away until next year and we'll do it all over again. And so when should you have or initiate these conversations? And I was telling somebody, unfortunately, I am the last minute person. I responded to my CPA's email July 1st from June 1st that she sent it to me. And so clearly this is not the time for me to say, and by the way, I want you to do my last minute return and can we talk strategy?
Right.
But when should you have
it's not. So crunch time. So July right now is April. It's what do they say? July is the new April, So now is not the time to have that conversation, but maybe afterwards, after we come up for air. I don't know about your accountant, but I haven't taken a break yet. And so when your accountant comes up for air, maybe that's an opportunity to say something like, or you can say, hey, after what's a good time for us to talk? I want to talk about some things that I have in the works or some of the things I'm trying to accomplish. And most accountants will be happy to have that conversation with you after the deadline.
And then I know we're a bit against time. We have one question. It says, who needs to be the quarterback in the relationship? So when we're talking about, you have your whole team, you have your banker, you have your attorney, you have your CPA. So you have all these people in the party. Who's kind of that lead relationship person?
You are, because you know what you want. You know where you're trying to go. You're driving the car, right? And the rest of us are passengers. And so we just need to know where you're trying to go because we've probably been there or we've helped somebody else to get there, but we don't know where you're trying to go until you tell us. So you're the quarterback.
That's a good answer. And okay, I was just checking to see if we have any other questions.
No, I see a question. So I see a question in the Zoom chat is about the clients who are afraid to look at their numbers. And I think that fear comes because people don't understand the numbers. And so going back to the original question about how to select an accountant, you may want to try to find somebody that's going to be able to explain your numbers to you in a way that makes sense. And so a lot of times, I had a client, one of my clients is a web designer. So, I'm saying that to say she's creative, right? And the last thing that she wanted to do was numbers. But once we sat down and I actually explained to her, this is what your profit and loss statement, this is what it means. These numbers mean this, these numbers mean that. She was like, you are the first person to ever get me excited about looking at my numbers. So most people are afraid to look at their numbers because they don't know what they're looking at. And I can totally get that because there's some areas in my life where it's like, Lord, I don't know what this is. Like, so if you don't know what you're looking at, that would be something that make you a little afraid. So.
And so let's say you're a person that's been in business. So we kind of talked about making sure you have someone to help you. Records are of huge value. And so having those, keeping up with those, not commingling assets. But let's say you have a legitimized business and whatever it is that you do, you're doing it well enough and you want to get to that next place. And so you talked a little bit about things like projections and so forth. Who's putting those together? And then how are you getting assistance to make sure that you're putting these numbers together and presenting these numbers in a way that makes sense to all interested parties?
Right. So that's definitely that's where your accounting system comes into place because projections are typically based on prior information. So we're looking at your accounting system and we see that last year you made $60,000 and you had $20,000 in expenses. But this year you've made X number of changes and based on those changes, you are expecting about a $15,000 increase, then we can make those projections based on those, based on that information. So it's really it's a joint effort, because your accountant can, yeah, we could go in and look at your numbers and kind of project, but we don't know the ins and outs of what you're doing. What are some of the things that you changed? Maybe you invested in a coaching program, and now that coaching program has you thinking a whole new way. And so you're doing stuff totally different. And based on that, you're anticipating some additional income. Or you've invested in a marketing plan that is driving your numbers up significantly. So those are just conversations that you have to have with your accountant. But we only know the numbers, so we have to also know the other factors that drive those numbers to be able to help you to make realistic projections, because yes, those are important, especially when it comes to funding or investors. If you're looking for someone to invest in your business, they need to know that you're going to be able to generate enough income to give them a return on their investment. So.
And we have a question, but you brought that up, and that was a really good, so it's very different between what you're presenting to maybe just an investor. So if you're asking a couple of your friends to invest in your business versus if you're going to the bank, what are the differences in information that you should be prepared? If you're going to your parents, they may be more lenient in terms of the documentation that you need to provide. But if you're going to a financial institution, or if you're going to maybe investors who aren't familiar with your business, what are some of the documents that you need to make sure that you have on hand?
So they're going to want to see a balance sheet, profit and loss statement, and probably a cash flow statement. Those are the three minimum things that they'll want to see, in addition to your projections. Like, what has your business done over the last 2 years? And it just keeps bringing us back to that accounting system, because you won't be able to produce any of these documents without the accounting system in place.
And let's see, we have Sharif has a question. I'm going to open it up so you can chat. Sharif, you want to ask your question? Sharif? All right. Well, we'll come back to you, Sharif, if you want to ask your question. And then Sharif, also, if you aren't able to unmute yourself, feel free to drop it in the chat. Kim has a question as well. She said, what should we know about the EIDL loan and who can or should apply? Because I know we have just a finite amount of time that's left. So about that application process in terms of who can apply.
So the EIDL loan, the SBA was really generous with the money that they were giving out for the EIDL loan. I know that they did take credit into consideration, but I'm not sure what their minimum score was with that. So credit was a factor with the EIDL loan. Then they also needed to be able to see, I think they were looking for viable businesses, like businesses that had like a history of cash flow. And in order to get the loan, they needed to see that COVID affected that cash flow, so those were some of the things that were taken into consideration. They were not very open about specifically what they were looking for, but I know a lot of people who got the loan, and myself included. And I honestly, when I applied and they sent me back my approval and the amount that I got approved for, I was like, what? For real? It was like, word, so they really, yeah, I'm serious. They were very, very generous. And I think it also depended on the business, the length of time that you've been in business, how much money you've generated over that time period. So it's a hit on your credit, but it's worth a shot, to apply for the loan and see if you get it. The PPP loan does not require credit, but your business does have to be profitable, and they just extended that one. So that's something else to think about.
And so to kind of piggybacking on that, so as we talk about the PPP and the EIDL, one of the things we start to talk about is the forgiveness process. And I know that was kind of like, maybe it'll be forgiven, maybe it won't. We were waiting on some direction there. I've seen some of the direction because I'm on the PPP side. So definitely I was like, I don't want to pay any of this back. What do we need to do? How to prepare your business. So if you've gotten it, or if you're in the process and you're looking to get it as well, how to prepare to be prepared for that forgiveness. Because definitely, I mean, the best thing to do is to never have to pay it back. Free money is always good money. I don't care how much it is. If they gave me $10 or $10 million, I would be happy. But I'd really rather not pay it back. And I don't care if it's just $10. How to get things in order today to prepare for that submission for forgiveness.
Yeah, so we're back at record keeping. I promise you I'm not trying to be a broken record, but it really, in order to be forgiven for that loan, you have to have documentation. You have to have your records in place. So with my clients, what we did is we have separate payroll accounts to show that they use the money on payroll or approved expenses. So there were certain things that you could pay, like rent, utilities, interest on business loans, things like that. And so you want to make sure that you have the documentation to prove that you have that you spent the money the way that you were supposed to spend it. Because the PPP loan was not so that, there are some people that are going to jail because they got that loan and just start balling out, but that's not what it was for.
Wasn't that kind of free money? It was a lot of winnings.
Yeah. It wasn't a lot of them.
It felt like it when it came. I was like, yes.
Yeah, I know, right?
If you received a check from the SBA, how do you know which program the loan came from if you applied for multiple loans?
So it probably depends on the amount. There was a grant. The grant was $1,000 per employee. So if you got like 1,000 or if you got 2,000, they just put it in your account, then that's the grant. And if you didn't apply for anything else, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to pay that back. Now, if you got the loan, you got a loan because you had to sign this long promissory note that says that you got this loan. So if you got the EIDL loan, you absolutely know that. They didn't just slide that money in your bank account. You actually had to sign for it. As far as the PPP loan, again, that was also an application that you had to apply for. So if you just got a direct deposit in your bank account, 9 times out of 10, that's probably the grant. And if that's all you got, you don't have to worry about paying that back because that was an advance. So people who got that grant, if you also got PPP, it's the unforgivable part of the PPP loan now. So hopefully that answered the questions.
And the loans are typically going to be a round number.
Yeah, so they both were. The grants were too, because they were all $1,000 per person. So if you got $1,000 deposit, that was the grant.
And then the PPP was a calculation, so that was
right. That one was not my PPP loan was some funky number. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't a round number.
We have another question. It says, if you keep good records already, is that the kind of record keeping that we need for? And I'm guessing she's talking about like on the loan forgiveness.
Yes. If you're already keeping good records, you're probably in good shape. With that.
You're already keeping good records. I know that's not always the easiest thing.
It's not.
Probably definitely the hardest thing to do. I started on the Excel spreadsheet. That's my, it's like, I could do this on an Excel spreadsheet.
Until it gets to be too much. You outgrow it. It's like,
And that's the goal. I mean, we want everyone to eventually outgrow, whether it be the structure that you have, whether it be the systems that you're using. If your business is continuously growing, you're evolving and you're going to need things that represent the evolution that you're doing. So we're hoping that everyone here is going to be in a situation where they're going to say, oh goodness, can't use spreadsheet anymore, or I can't use the $25 a month version of QuickBooks anymore.
And the $25 version of QuickBooks is very, very good. In fact, I'm glad, because I almost forgot to tell you guys this. So if anybody is interested in getting QuickBooks, I am a reseller. You can still keep your accountant, and I can get you a discount. So I'm hook you up. No, just, seriously though, with my discount, you will get 30 days free and 50% off for the first 12 months.
Yeah.
And that's for new subscribers. So if anybody is interested in using QuickBooks, it's an excellent way of being able to, get your feet wet and not have to pay the full price. So if you got like the simple start version, which is $25, then you would pay like $12.50 or something like that for the first 30 days free, and then $12.50 for the next 12 months.
That's big. You don't have to drop that.
Yeah. So what I need you to let's see. I do have a link. I have a link to a form, like a jot form. So you want me to drop it in the Facebook group?
Yes,
Okay.
we'll drop it in the Facebook group as a follow-up to this, because I think a lot of people will. I mean, we talked about, depending on where you are, you might not think you're a quote-unquote business owner because you have a couple of rental properties, but QuickBooks would be amazing. As a landlord myself, I use the shoebox method. Every year I'm like, I am not doing this next year. And so to go ahead and kind of push and get those resources together would be key. I have another question. It says, what is the typical amount of the EIDL loan or the PPP loan? Not sure which one she received because she applied for both.
The EIDL loans. So I know a lot of people who got the loans. Nobody is really sharing their their loan amounts, because it's one of those things where you don't walk out the store with cash, flipping cash in your hand, like you don't want nobody to knock you upside the head. So I don't know, but I know most of the people that I know who got the EIDL loan, it was at least 5 figures. So, like $40,000 to $70,000, most of the business owners that I know who got it. Like I said, if you got the EIDL loan, you got an EIDL loan because there was a document. You had to sign a promissory note, and it was several pages long. So if you got that loan, you got it. PPP, same thing. It was a very long application. Then you had to sign, and that one wasn't through this SBA. You actually applied for that one through the bank. So if you applied for the grant and the EIDL loan, you may have gotten the grant already, and then you may still be waiting on the EIDL loan because they're still processing those.
So definitely, and over time, definitely whoever you got the loan from as well. I know in our situation, I've gotten a bunch of emails too. So if you went through your bank should be able to tell you, because they should be sending you, an invite to a webinar, or maybe here's information on the forgiveness and all those kind of things. So they would be your resource as well, because if you went through whatever bank it is that you work with, and that's one thing I'll say too, because like I said, my background is banking. Have a banker that you talk to, know that you don't just, ignore when they call, because those were the people who got access to the loans first. So you want to be able to have that relationship, make sure you have that as part of your team. And then we got a bunch of questions. Okay, we're going over. Okay, so
I'm fine with going over.
So it says, what about the Wave apps?
That was one of the softwares. I think Wave is free. I've honestly never used it, so I don't know. I'm sure, free means limited, but it may do what you need it to do. And it may be a good start.
And since you get the first 30 days free through Bernadette, might as well try out what we know has had a long longevity in terms of in the business industry. Go ahead and get your 30 days. Try out a few months as well, since it'll be at half price. Seems like a good deal to me. And then we have another question. It says, oh, wait.
I just answered it because it was anonymous, so I just answered it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
It's like, wait.
Yeah, the person was anonymous, so I just typed the answer to it. She said that she gave the amount that she got, and she said that it was generated through PayPal. So it sounds like that might be PPP. If it didn't come from the SBA and it came from a bank or a financial institution, then it was more than likely PPP.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? I'm checking on Facebook too. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Oh, wait. Oh,
no, she was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Perfect. And so want to just make sure that we got all the information out. If you have any other questions whatsoever, this is always recorded. And it's also going to be sitting in the event itself. So if you want to go back or you want a friend to look at it as well, in the event itself, so you can go back and look at the past events, the recording is always stored there. Also, I always tag our speaker, so Bernadette will be tagged. So if you need to message her and reach out for any personal questions, feel free to do that as well. Let me know if you have any other questions as Bernadette is doing her closing remarks, and I'll make sure that we answer those even after the closing remarks as well.
Okay. So again, thank you for allowing me to be here. I hope that everybody leaves with something they didn't come with. And if you have specific questions that you didn't want to ask in the chat and you want to have a conversation with me, my website is bythebookaccounting.com, and that's BY, thebookaccounting.com. You can schedule a discovery call and we can talk, about whatever it is that maybe we didn't talk about here. So I'd love to speak with you. I will also go to the group after this is over and put the link in there for the QuickBooks. Again, with QuickBooks, you can continue to work with your current accountant. So if you have an accountant, you can still work with your accountant and still get the discount. I just have to submit the order through my portal with Intuit. And so that's why I need you to complete that JOT form. And once you complete the JOT form, then I can submit your information. And then the last thing is my podcast. And so if you are a listener of podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, I would love for you to subscribe. It is called the CEO Launch. We are on every single directory that there is. We're on Apple and Google and Spotify and Stitcher and blah, blah, blah. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can also listen at theceolaunch.com. So we launched last week. Our first full episode dropped last week. And we are dropping an episode every Wednesday. So go ahead and catch up so you'll be ready for the episode that is coming on this Wednesday. It is a mother-daughter duo. My daughter is 25 and she's an entrepreneur. And so we're just kind of sharing our journey as entrepreneurs from different generations. So hopefully you will subscribe and like it. So that's it. Any last minute questions?
And one more. It says, if you receive the PPP, can you also apply for the EIDL?
Yes. If you receive PPP and you get EIDL, you just cannot use EIDL for payroll. But just use it for everything else and just use your income for payroll. That's all. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bernadette. I hope everyone got a lot out of today's session, and want to remind you again that Eureka is a business community that we have partnered with. This business community actually has a number of professionals that meet within the community and provide you a number of different resources as well. So whether that be mentorship, whether that be some free legal advice, maybe some CPAs to help guide you as well. You can always call Bernadette. But having all of those resources at your fingertips, and it also has some business owners that maybe have had a viable business, sold that business, retired from that business, and what have you, that are there to provide you some guidance as well. And so what I want to do is make sure that you see, and we should be dropping the link in here as well, that you have the link where you can join use my code so you'll be a part of our group as well. So we can share information. We'll be sharing some of these videos in there. So it'll be a second place for you to have some of these resources. And we'll have some of our speakers that are over in the group as well. So they'll be able to answer some of the questions for you in the future also. So if you have any questions for me, as always, just message me. Thank you so much, Bernadette. And don't forget to join us next week. We'll have Nikki Porcher from the nonprofit Buy from a Black Woman. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye-bye.